Hello students, I'm your teacher King Link, and welcome back for a second year. And of course by that I mean, it's time for my last look and review of Danganronpa 2, Goodbye Despair. We'll say goodbye, but somehow this series has stuck with me better than most games I've played this year. In fact, that's one of the reasons I'm talking about Danganronpa 2. The first game was extremely good, and the fact is I had to play more. I told myself I'd wait to get a good deal on it, and ended up with a copy last month, finally playing it this month, and I'm glad I did. Of course, before we get into it, you'll want to sign up for my new lecture series, and by that I really mean subscribe to my channel, so you can get all the important information. Consider ringing that school bell next to the subscribe button, as class is now in session. Now I'm going to try to rush through this a bit, because there's a lot to say, so hang on to your hats. I've attached my last look and review of the original Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc in the description. If you haven't played that game, stop this video, go watch that review, or just play that game. The reason is, this is a game in a story series. Don't even consider this game before beating the first game. The stories aren't exactly a sequel, but much of the game is built off the events of the first game, and honestly, you do need to play them in order. In addition, I'm going to be showing stuff right after my first look. This is going to be played slowly so that I'm not showing off too much. I'm trying to avoid a lot of spoilers here. That's just the way I am. But with that said, enjoy the video if you want to see the opening of it. Again, very early. Okay, are you all still there? Great, let's talk about Danganronpa 2. And another reason I wanted people to play the first game is, admittedly, I'm a bit lazy. Listen, I reviewed the first game in full, and rather than saying everything a second time, I'm going to focus on what's different, unique, or improved. I shouldn't have to explain the trial system that was in the first game, so let's talk about the sequel and what's new. Graphically, it's the same game. There's some niceties here, such as a new movement system that's side-scrolling, rather than only the first-person view that was in the first game. But the original game looked good, and I'm happy with the state of the second game's graphics. It is still anime-ish, and it works. In fact, the quality of some of these events are a little bit better. Since this is a visual novel, the story is the most important part of the game though. And while the gameplay is important, and I always say gameplay is king, really, you're here to see what happens next. Like I said, play Danganronpa first. It really sets up the game and creates the perfect lead-in as well. The game itself almost makes an assumption that you played the first game in a couple locations and story pieces. Now, there is one thing I do have to call out on Danganronpa 2. The game starts off with an interesting fake-out, where right now we're on a deserted island. We had just been met by magical girl Usami. You can see it in the first look. She's a rabbit like Monokuma. She's a teacher and super nice. She just wants you to build hope fragments. Yay! Honestly, the opening is really odd and out of place. Now the problem I have though is that the fake-out only starts when you hit new game. As you load into the title screen, it shows the real opening credits, and the title screen shows Monokuma exactly as you expected. There's no chance that the fake-out truly works because you've already shown the real face of the game as you first boot it up. I know it's a minor complaint, but that's really a big complaint I have with the story, and honestly for how small it is, that's a good sign. Now I won't go into spoiler territory here, and I actually haven't written a spoiler review this time because I don't think it needs it. The fact is, Danganronpa 2 has an excellent story, whether it's because I've accepted the flaws of the first game, the minor ones in the story, or the second is all about subverting those expectations from the first game, and in fact it actually does have a lot more surprises than I expected. I can honestly say I think it's even better than the original game. Again though, visual novels, play them in order. I think I've said that enough. I do want to call out a few things though. The second game is far more sexual, adult in its humor, than the first game. Simple fact, and it's not a big problem, but it's definitely something I have a minor issue with. Now, listen, I get that it's supposed to be a dating sim, and that's kind of haha funny in dating sims, but technically, a bunch of people start dying. At some point, stop thinking with your second head, guys. And yes, it is of course the guys. In addition, most of the trials and investigations are a bit too obvious. There's a handful of good twists here, but after playing the original Danganronpa, you know what to look for twists. Now, you tend to find many of them. There is some big surprises and reveal, but they're not as easy to pull off for the game. That's great for the viewer, but, I like the big twists. Now, the story here takes a long time. I think I played about 30 hours of the first game, including some post-game time, about 10 hours there. But this one took me closer to 40 for the full story. That's not a bad thing, mind you, quantity is still good, but a lot of the game feels long. It just feels. It took about 6 hours per chapter, 6 chapters. The trials themselves tend to take about 2 hours apiece, even having a break about an hour into each one. Now, honestly, I don't know what I would have cut down specifically, but they are a bit long in my opinion. They are still quality story though. Now, let's just talk about the gameplay since that's always important. As always, I'll go into far more detail in my written review, and I don't want to itemize everything here, but I will go over the big pieces. To put it simply, almost every trial element has improved from the first game. The circular discussions, the make your arguments stages, which I loved, feel better and more interesting. There's even a new consent instead of just an argument version. The game does still require going from A to B logically, and admittedly, if you can't do that, for whatever reason you just miss something, you get stuck. But it isn't as obtuse as the first game for most of it. Hangman is improved. It's not great, but it is improved from what it was in the first game. There's no fake letters. Spelling and order are important, of course, but there's a little more action in the game, and that's what I kind of lose it on. It's not really the strong point of the game. On the other hand, Panic Time Action, PTA, yeah, get that joke. The new Bullet Time Battle is good. The final moment has you select a few words in order, and it's an interesting improvement as well. It actually feels a little bit faster as a mini game as well, which I appreciate, I have to say. And finally, the one that I really disliked from the first game along with Hangman was closing arguments. And honestly, it's still as pointless as the first game. It is a retelling of everything you already know and have just figured out, but at least this time they've improved the gameplay, made it so it's a little more direct about what panels they're looking for and what's in each panel. It's good, just still why retell the story? And yeah, that's all the stuff that's improved. Kudos to the team for making a better game. Now, there are a couple additions to the game, and they're kind of the problem in my opinion. The first big change is the Rebuttal Battle. It's a one-on-one fight between the main character and another student who are arguing a specific, kind of random point most times. It's a great idea, but instead of the standard trial setup, the player has to slash at words in a very action-y setup. Honestly, it doesn't work as well as it could have. The slashing is limited to the number of times you can. There's HP for the words. I mean, really, what the hell is going on with this mode? Now, Rebuttal Battle is more like a puzzle than a true action game, and it still has a bit of the trial in it. Now, for true action, we're talking about the logic dive. Basically, the main character is riding a snowboard down a half, or really a full pipe. It looks similar to Sonic 2's bonus level. It's interesting, but then they start throwing in jumps, obstacles that you have to dodge and all, and the player has to choose the answer from up to 3 paths, which are all in the circle. Honestly, you ride the answers. It's the strangest thing I've ever seen in a visual novel, and I will say that it doesn't work. You see, Logic Dive and Rebuttal Battle is out of place. It doesn't really fit in a logic-based game, and it's not very fun. It just rides a little bit too hard on the action. Now, I get the desire to try to improve your sequel or make it better or different, but I really don't feel that those two modes make a better game overall, and they're rather big flaws. That's not to say every new feature is worse. The skills are now purchasable with the hope fragments you get from friendship events, so you don't just get random skills from random people, you can instead choose which abilities you want to buy. In addition, Monokuma has you find hidden Monokumas as a Monokuma puzzle where you can find a number of him and get 10 Monokuma coins for Monokuma gifts. Yeah, that's a lot of Monokuma, but really, it's an interesting new find the hidden Monokuma system. Finally, there's an interesting Tamagotchi system that allows you to grow your own pets and give them presents over time. It's odd, it's unique, and it's a great diversion in the game, and I found myself continuing to play the Tamagotchi more than I would have imagined. It's great. And honestly, that in total is Danganronpa 2. There's much more I could talk about, but I don't want to spoil anything. There's a lot of good amount of post-game content here, more than the original game. But like I said, there's a good story here, again no spoilers, and while I dislike some of the new gameplay, the trials, while long, are really enjoyable. The characters are great, Usami who becomes Monomi is a fantastic addition to the game, and honestly it's so good. I ultimately give Danganronpa 2 Goodbye Despair a 4 out of 5. Solid score, up a half point from the original, whether that's because I'm more accepting to what Danganronpa now is, or whether it's a better game. I'm kind of torn on it, but really, here's the short version. If you enjoyed the first game and want more, definitely pick this up. This game is made for you. If on the other hand you hated the original game, honestly, this was never going to change your mind. It is what it is, and I like it, and I know a lot of people will, but that's just my take on Danganronpa 2. I'm glad I played it, and now I have to try to figure out how to get my hands on the sequels. Apparently there's 2 out there already, Danganronpa Another Story and Danganronpa 3. I'm sure we'll talk about them at some point in the near future. And honestly, that's Danganronpa 2. I've really enjoyed myself with it, and I'm thrilled to have played it. Next up, well, it's December, so we'll be talking about something for the humble monthly bundle of January 2019. It's going to be Just Cause 3. A game with so much promise, so much fun, and honestly inspires so much anger from me for a few issues. We'll talk about it next time. Until then, I'm King Link, and thank you very much for watching.